We are a mere day or so till the first college football playoff rankings so far this season. Which games, or better yet, which teams made an impactful presence for the committee? And number 4, Ohio State went into Happy Valley. Spoiler alert, one team wasn't so happy after that. And the number 1 team in the country, Oregon Ducks, went into Ann Arbor for their very first matchup as a Big Ten opponent in Michigan. And also, it may be fall, it may be football season, but it's officially spoiler season. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights, where I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and with me today is none other than David Street.
Hey, guys.
And this was such a great college football weekend, whether it was top 5 matchups or even top 20, top 25 matchups to even unranked opponents. Once again, college football never seems to fail. At least for me, it doesn't. But I talked about spoilers, and we almost saw quite a spoiler yesterday, and I have to kind of go right into this because, David, I see you are still rocking Gator Strong, and I respect that. You always represent your team, win or loss, and I have always respected that about you. So kind of have to ask you, how are things feeling? Because I feel like we were just one injury away from a potential upset.
Well, Matthew, we have a saying at the University of Florida, and that is in all kinds of weather. Whether that weather is, whether that weather, ain't that funny?
Yes. Yeah.
Whether that weather is good or bad in all kinds of weather. And I am never ashamed to represent my team. Listen, we came into this game against Georgia fully expecting to not just lose, but get our asses kicked. And surprisingly, that did not happen. Now, sure, if you didn't look at the game, or if you didn't watch the game, you might look at the box score stats and you might conclude that, oh well, Georgia totally kicked Florida's ass because they doubled up on us on yards, and they just statistically they were more dominant. But if you had actually watched the game, they didn't look like the more dominant team. I mean, we all saw DJ Lagway throw that deep bomb, and at that point he was 2 for 6. He left the game with the 2 for 6 passing stat, which that's not the greatest stat, but that's also extremely tiny, and we all saw the potential that he had for the rest of that game. So it comes down to our third string guy, Aiden Warner, who didn't look great, but also I can't really fault him for that because he was thrown into an absolutely impossible situation. Even down to our third stringer and just all the injuries that we had, the fact that we tied it with Georgia 20-20 with a few minutes left in the fourth quarter, I could not believe what I was seeing. I was pinching myself thinking, okay, this is not happening right now. There is no way in hell we're tied with Georgia. Could we actually beat Georgia? Because you also have to remember that Carson Beck played like shit. He threw 3 picks. Really should have had a fourth pick if that Florida player, I can't remember who it was, if he didn't drop that ball. But Carson Beck did not have a great game. Georgia won that game in spite of Carson Beck, not because of him. So listen, I'm kind of numb to it because on one hand, I can't ever be happy about losing to Georgia, even if it's a hard fought 1 point loss and a shootout victory. It always sucks losing to an arch rival. But at the same time, I also can't be mad either because for the first time in a few years, Florida actually put up an effort against Georgia. But at the end of the day, it wasn't good enough. We've now lost to Georgia 4 years in a row for the first time since sometime in the 80s.
Yeah, and I talked about just about a couple weeks ago the miracle of Devontae Adams' hamstring injury when he got traded, it all of a sudden healed itself. Like, oh, it was a miracle. Well, uh, similar to that with this is everyone wanted Billy Napier's head, and then now the miracle happened of, oh, it was a close game against Georgia. We're not going to talk about that right now. And but the future does look bright with Florida because of DJ Lagway. And I think that that could buy Billy Napier one more year. What do you think, David?
Well, I've accepted the fact that Billy Napier is coming back, whether I like it or not. And as far as Billy Napier goes, man, I posted this on Twitter and I got blasted for it, but I stand by it 100%. I think a lot of the blame for DJ's injury goes on Billy. And fans are saying, but the field sucks. It's a well known fact that Jacksonville's field, I can talk tonight.
Yeah.
The, the point I'm trying to make is that yes, we know that the Jags field sucks. So then why would you make it worse for yourself? Okay. We saw DJ throw that deep bomb, as I mentioned before. So then why would you turn him into a runner, knowing how risky it is? DJ can pass the ball. In my opinion, there was absolutely no reason to keep running the ball. I'm not trying to say that he should not have had any more running plays afterward, but it's the fact that we went into running immediately after his touchdown pass that I just did not understand. So I don't really want to hear the excuses for Billy. Okay, is DJ's injury his fault completely? No, because again, I understand that's a shitty field. Okay, but I think Billy didn't help himself with the decisions he made that eventually led up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that field sucks, but you know what else I feel like sucks, and that's James Franklin at Penn State. Okay, James Franklin against big teams at Penn State. So let's go ahead and use that as a segue to go to this next game, and that's Ohio State at Penn State. This was the marquee premier matchup going into this week. Uh, Penn State was looking pretty good so far this year. How are they going to do against Ohio State? This is a home game. This is in Happy Valley. This is one of the most electrifying and pack-filled stadiums in all of college football. Therefore, it should swing in Penn State's favor. Theoretically, yes. But when your coach is James Franklin, answer becomes a little iffy. I don't know. And Ohio State, they they came in. They have one loss this year, and that was against Oregon, just a 1 point loss on the road, a true road game. Well, how are they going to do on a true road game in Penn State this year against an undefeated team? And they showed up to the occasion. It wasn't the prettiest game by no means. Right before halftime, we saw the double turnover. So that was Ohio State with the turnover into the end zone where they were about to score. And then Penn State on the flip side of it, a pick interception right to pretty much in the half and the end zone as well. So it looked ugly and a massive pick six earlier for Penn State's defense. But David, Penn State really didn't have any offense. Actually, both these teams didn't really have any offense. Are you concerned at all for these teams as the season goes on, especially to the playoffs? Because you have to have offense to win these games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think either team scored an offensive touchdown in the second half of that game. And, when you're looking at Ohio State's offense, I mean, Matthew, they've only averaged 20 and a half points per their last two games. Now they are facing Purdue next. So that's a wonderful opportunity for their offense to get back into form. But just and as far as Penn State goes, man, when it comes to James Franklin, there are some people where you have to believe him when he shows you who he is. And we know exactly who James Franklin is. James Franklin is a guy who can beat the teams he's supposed to beat, but when the lights shine bright, he folds like a lawn chair. That's just who he is.
Yeah, you could look at probably his overall record. He probably averages, maybe two losses a year. So he does put up wins, but he just can't put up the wins when it matters most. He is 1-14 against top five teams. He's 1-7 versus top 10 teams at home. So we talk about how much of an impact home games are in college football. Well, he can't even win those games at home against the top 10 teams. 6-10 versus ranked opponents also at home. And here's the big one: 1-10 versus Ohio State. We know that Big Ten conference goes through Ohio State or Michigan, and of course there's a couple anomaly years. Okay, we'll say that, but for the most part, it's Ohio State or Michigan, and more for the Ohio State. You can't go 1-10 against Ohio State and expect to go places, because that's where it really matters the most. And David, why can't James Franklin win these games? Is he just one of those guys that just struggles?
I think I think he just I don't know. I think ultimately, Matthew, I think ultimately what it comes down to is that I think he has a tendency to maybe overestimate his opponents. I think he panics in the moment against teams when the lights are the brightest. I think, eh, and I hate that I'm struggling to find an answer because I feel like because it's just mind boggling to me, right? Like you've how I don't know how long James Franklin has been at Penn State. It has to be at least 10 years at this point, maybe a little less than that, but around that, right? At this point, you should have more wins against quality opponents, but you just don't. And I'm struggling to find an answer because it just blows me away how someone can be this bad against the top teams. But you know something, Matthew? At the end of the day, it it possibly might not even matter because Penn State could still possibly make the playoffs. Especially this is a perfect playoff system for them because the top 12 teams go, and Penn State I think will still end up being a top 12 team. And I'm not saying Penn State's going to win the national championship. I absolutely don't think that they are. But hypothetically speaking, okay, let's say that they do. Let's say that they get all these crazy matchups that are completely in their favor. Okay, they don't have to deal with Ohio State. They don't have to deal with Oregon or Georgia or anybody, and they just coast onto a national championship. And then suddenly it's like all the struggles that James Franklin has had, that Penn State has had under him, is not going to matter anymore. Because the thing about college football is that probably more so than any other sport, it's really a lot about taking advantage of your opportunities.
Yeah, and Ohio State did take advantage of that opportunity, picking up a massive win on the road. And surely it is going to bump them up to being a top three team once the college football playoff rankings do come out. Whether they are at 3 or at 2, it just matters between them and Georgia and how the committee sees them. But they are getting the wins, and they do deserve to be there. Where Penn State, they could still get there, but they are going to have a little bit of a journey. So, but the new system will help them out. Staying in the Big Ten, number one Oregon goes into Michigan. This You look at this game last year versus this year, and totally different. Totally different. This Michigan team is just revamped. They are still trying to figure out their identity a little bit. New coach, new quarterback. Who dis? What are we really doing? Where Oregon, on the other hand, yes, we have a new quarterback with Dylan Gabriel, but it's still a lot of similarities as last year. And they brought in some key transfers, Evan Stewart being one of them at receiver position, but Oregon is just looking really good right now, offensively and defensively. Okay, defensively, they are at one of the elite defenses in college football, and that's thanks to Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning had a vision going to Oregon. He wanted it to look like SEC football with an SEC defense. I wouldn't go as far yet as to saying Oregon is an SEC defense, but they are looking great. They are trending in the right direction. But they won this game on the road, 38-17. It was the most points Michigan allowed since the upset to TCU in the college football playoff. And believe it or not, David, it's the first conference loss they've had since 2022. So it's been a couple years. I mean, they went undefeated last year, and then the year before, in 22, ended up being their last loss. But Michigan's not used to that happening, and at home. And the Ducks just look like they are separating themselves from the pack, but I wouldn't jump out to it just yet. They are talented, but a lot of people aren't talking about this, but they probably should. But Oregon, we lost our best receiver in Tez Johnson. Looks like he's going to be out the rest of the year, which I absolutely hate because he has been the heart and soul on our offense ever since last year. He set the record at Oregon, and he for most receptions in a season, and he was on pace to doing that again this year. It hurts seeing that third play of the game. It looked like collarbone might have broke it. I hate that because we were looking so good, and we were looking good because of him and the rest of the team. So that does hurt losing someone like that. But Oregon is deep in the receiver position. Trayshawn Holden, who led the day yesterday in receiving yards, Evan Stewart, Terrence Ferguson, the tight ends position. We are still looking good, but it's tough when you lose your number one receiver. But David, do you think the Ducks are separating themselves from the rest of the pack?
I think absolutely that they are. And I have to ask, by the way, did you mean that that was Michigan's first Big Ten loss at home?
I might have meant to say that. Yeah,
Yeah, because they also lost to Illinois and one other team that I can't remember.
yeah. I think it was first conference loss at home. Thanks for the correction.
Yeah, and yeah, no worries. I figured that's what you meant. Just want to
Yeah,
ask. But yeah, absolutely. I think Oregon has absolutely separated themselves, and a big reason why I say that is because when I look at the remaining schedule for you guys, it's very favorable for you guys to go 12-0. And something that really sticks out to me, Matthew, regarding Oregon is that unlike a lot of other teams, especially teams that have serious aspirations, Oregon got its struggle out of the way early. Whereas you look at teams like Georgia, Alabama, Texas, teams that just came flying out of the gates right away. But then you look at Alabama; they almost blew a huge lead against Georgia. They lost to Vanderbilt, almost lost to South Carolina. You look at Georgia; they were down big to Alabama, and they almost lost to Florida of all teams. And Carson Beck has looked trash. Meanwhile, I remember in the very beginning, a lot of people, me included, had Oregon as the number 2 team in the country behind just Georgia. And then Oregon struggles the first couple of weeks against Idaho and Boise State. And everybody almost unanimously was calling Oregon the most overrated team in the country. Well, look at them now, all right? Where a lot of these other teams looked great early on, but have really been struggling since. Oregon has done the opposite. They struggled early on, but since then, they have looked absolutely dominant. The only team that they did not look dominant against was Ohio State, but that's Ohio State. There's no shame in that whatsoever. And so I think there's really a blessing in disguise when you lose a game or when you still win but you look really really bad, especially early in the season, because that kind of gives you an opportunity to fix what you need to fix. And it's especially better to do that in the beginning of the season rather than toward the end. And I guarantee you that Oregon is thankful every single day that they got their struggle games out of the way early on, because the same Oregon team that we're seeing right now is sure as hell not the same Oregon team that we saw in the beginning of the season, Matthew.
yeah. It's not how you start; it's how you finish. And they are looking strong, and I hope that they finish strong. I would love to see that with my team. So right now, things are looking great for them. Anything could still happen, but I like the chances. I like our chances with Oregon and with Dan Lanning there. He seems to be the coach that I would absolutely love to play for, and it seems like the players also agree with that too. So, I mean, I still remember after the upset victory over Ohio State, his first thing was, "This is why you come to Oregon," and that was powerful to me. It gave me chills hearing that because he wants people to believe in this program because he believes in this program. This isn't some type of infomercial. This is him really trying to sell to the recruits, to the transfer portals, whatever you may be. come to Oregon. This is why you play for Oregon. So I love seeing that. And then on the flip side, Michigan coming from an undefeated national championship last year to then losing your head coach, your starting quarterback, your starting running back. You have some changes here, and it's not looking the best for them. It's still year one. Don't get me wrong. Jim Harbaugh had some struggles too early on, but where are they going to go from here? Because they still have to face Indiana, which is a damn good team in the Big Ten, and Ohio State for two of its final three games. That's not going to be easy. And with that being said, they could finish 6-6, David. So going from an undefeated national championship year to finishing at 500 is not a good scenario for this Michigan team. They are losing recruits. They are trying to buy recruits so bad right now because they are struggling. They need some type of momentum, and right now this team isn't giving that momentum on the recruiting trail. So what do they need to do? And I mean, does Sherrone Moore deserve a chance to come back? I think he does. It's only year one. If we were to fire coaches after year one, we would see some coaches wouldn't even had a chance ever. So, what do you think, David?
Well, to kind of quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, from a certain point of view, you are right that Jim Harbaugh did struggle in the beginning, but Jim Harbaugh's struggles were against the teams that were simply better and that were better coached. Because Jim Harbaugh, even in the beginning, still beat the teams that he was supposed to beat. Whereas with Sherrone Moore, he's just been getting his tail kicked in a lot of the games that he's played. But it is year one for him, and we also have to remember that Michigan lost a lot of key players last year, and it wasn't just players; they lost key personnel. Period, because of course we know that they lost Jim Harbaugh to the NFL. So when you lose a lot of players, including your top 10 quarterback and head coach, you just can't expect to repeat the same production. Now, maybe Michigan fans didn't expect their team to be this bad. I certainly did it. I didn't. I think I had them at 8-4, maybe even 9-3. Certainly, I didn't have them at what could possibly be 6-6 because their final two of their three games. They have to face Indiana, who's just been looking absolutely unstoppable, and they have to face Ohio State. But one of the things that that is a saving grace for any coach in Sherrone Moore's position is what does the recruiting class look like? And right now Michigan's recruiting class is number 13, and they do have the number 2 offensive recruit in the country, in Andrew Babalola, I think is his name. And remember, what was a big reason Michigan won the national championship last year? Because they had a phenomenal offensive line. So Michigan is at least still recruiting in the trenches. And let's also not forget, Matthew, that Michigan was never really an elite recruiting team under Jim Harbaugh. They were a very good recruiting team. They were an average top 10. Like, they averaged a top 10 class under him, I think. But still, 13th is not good enough, even if it is just Sherrone Moore's first year. So I think he deserves another chance. But going from winning the national championship to possibly going 6-6, even with all the players you lost, even knowing that you're probably going to take a step back, that's always going to sting.
Yeah, it's tough because it's not like they were left in the best case scenario, but I'm sure Jim Harbaugh left Sherrone Moore with quite a blueprint of the steps to success, and that is recruiting in the trenches, starting there. Sherrone Moore's been around, so he knows. And like I said, the blueprint was left for him on really what to do to succeed. And it's just year one. You got to give him time. It's only fair, especially them being national champs. It's still Michigan. At the end of the day, it's still Michigan. So I think just giving him that time, Michigan can turn things around. It's just they need to figure out the quarterback position. I was impressed with Davis Warren yesterday. I think that they just need to continue to stick with him and show him that sign of confidence because I think he could do great things. And when you have a tight end like they do, I mean, Colston Loveland is an amazing tight end. So uh, they do have a lot of recipes for success. They just need to get things right and stay consistent, because I was one of those that said I thought Alex Orji was going to be the starter, and I think it's best that he's not, but things are too predictable. When he's in the game, it's a guaranteed he's going to run it. They aren't even trying to hide it at this point. So it's like they do need to fix that, but that's stuff that they will fix throughout the offseason. So Michigan, they do need to get better, and I think that they will. But right now, Oregon looks to be a phenomenal team by a phenomenal coach. And before I go into this next game, I want to talk about, I just want to list a lot of the upsets that happened yesterday, because we saw number 3 Penn State go down. I mean, not being upset, but a lot of the ranked teams that went down. Penn State went down. Number 10 A&M went down. Number 11 Iowa State went down. Clemson went down. Kansas State went down. Pitt went down. And lastly, Illinois went down. There was a lot of ranked teams that lost yesterday, David. So it's the door's open for these teams, with now the first college football playoff about to come out. The door is left over for a lot of teams, and the 12-team playoff really helps them out. So which teams are going to stand out the most? Because this is when it matters. And yesterday, there was a team that was expected to be there when things are all said and done. They still very well maybe, because I think just like Penn State, they control their own destiny. And that is number 10 Texas A&M going into South Carolina and losing in very embarrassing fashion. I mean, South Carolina had just about everything right in this game, David. And a part of me thinks this is what we should expect from South Carolina, because they could play spoiler. And that's what they did yesterday. Coach Shane Beamer's team, uh, they came in with a game plan, and I think they executed it to perfection, David. Would you agree?
Absolutely, man. And there's three things guaranteed in life: death, taxes, South Carolina playing spoiler toward the end of the season. Man, I'm telling you, if you're a coach of a top five, top 10 team, okay, a team that has legit aspirations, and you're going into South Carolina's stadium, you're thinking to yourself, well, crap. You may not externally admit it, but deep inside you're thinking crap, because that's just who South Carolina has shown us to be. Because remember, this is the same team that absolutely obliterated Tennessee a couple years ago, when Tennessee had a great chance of making the playoffs. They had a great shot at going 11-1, but South Carolina had other plans.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And last night their plan was let Lenore Sellers play. And that guy played his butt off. I mean, 350 plus total yards with 200 plus through the air, 100 plus on the ground. He was unstoppable. They didn't have an answer for them. He had 3 total touchdowns. That guy is so big and so strong that it wasn't even fair, them trying to tackle. I mean, Texas A&M couldn't even tackle at all yesterday. That like third down and one play or fourth down one play on the 1 yard line where they threw it to the receiver, A&M couldn't even tackle the guy, and he ran for a massive touchdown. It's like it just wasn't fair, because they just seemed Lenora Sellers is a big dude, and I knew coming into this year he was going to do good things for South Carolina. I know they aren't having the season where they want to be. Of course, they want to be competitive in the SEC, but I, I like what I see out of Lenora Sellers, and him and their rushing. It wasn't just him. The whole Gamecocks rushing was just up to par. 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Mike Elko's team just struggled in South Carolina. So you're absolutely right. South Carolina playing spoiler here, but David, there is a massive tiebreaker happening in the SEC right now, because A&M, as we know, was leading the SEC going into this week atop of it. Now, these are the teams that have one loss in conference play in the SEC. Georgia, A&M, Tennessee, Texas, LSU. Those are some top tier teams right there. So, and now that we've scrapped the divisions, how are things going to shake out in the SEC? At the end of the day, is it going to be Georgia and Texas? Or actually, the real question is, out of those teams I just listed, David, how many of them are going to make the college football playoff? Because we know that the SEC is where it's at.
Well, I think Matthew. I think at this point, I think the only guarantees from the SEC, if I had to put money on it, are Georgia and Texas.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah.
no, go ahead, go ahead. You can finish your thought.
Well, yeah, because those seem to be the two teams that everyone's talking about. They aren't playing their best football. We just talked about how Carson Beck another three interceptions, almost four interceptions. It seems like that's all he knows how to do. I mean, he does know how to win, but they aren't looking the best. Same thing with Texas. Quinn Ewers in Texas. They are still trying to get a hold of things. They did have a very tough victory against Vandy, which Vandy has proven to be a quality opponent for once in football. All right, in football, or baseball, it's different, but football they seem to be a quality opponent. So, uh, yeah, Texas and Georgia seem to be the only two teams. But what were you going to say, David?
You said something that I just wanted to push back against a little because you said that South Carolina is not where they want to be. I'm not really sure I agree with that, Matthew, because at the end of the day, they're 5-3 with the freshman quarterback. I think given who they have and all that, I think they are exactly where they want to be right now because we have to keep in mind that South Carolina is not a perennial title contender. They've never really been that. The only time really that they've ever come close to being a title contender was when they had Steve Spurrier, but that was an anomaly. And the chances of them getting a legend like Steve Spurrier was 1 in a million. So they, other than that extremely rare era that they had, they've never really been a team that's expected to do much. So again, freshman quarterback, 5-3, they have a great win. I think they're exactly where they want to be, Matthew. Now, if if South Carolina ends up going 5-7, 6-6, or whatever, then we can revisit this later on. But just for now, I think South Carolina has to be happy with where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you are absolutely right there. Yeah, the goal for every team is to win, but there's also expectations that need to be reality. And so you're absolutely right that that is the reality, and it probably does meet their expectations right now with considering what they have, especially a freshman quarterback. But with this victory here and how they're looking so far this year, what does this do for Shane Beamer? Does this give him, several more years in South Carolina?
Well, again, as I said before, South Carolina is not a team that is expected to win the title year in and year out. And unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure Shane Beamer has won more games than he's lost. He did go 5-7 last year, but if I'm not mistaken, I think South Carolina was hit hard with the injury bug. But listen, Shane Beamer has had some awful losses. There's been games where he's looked really bad, but at the end of the day, again, just consider the context of the situation. I think Shane Beamer has done as good as he can at that program, and yes, I think he's absolutely earned earned the right to keep coaching there.
Yeah. Well, now we're at the point of predictions right now in the show with the college football playoff getting ready to come out. David, I want to give our take on our top five, or how we think let's say how we think the committee will come out with the top five. Okay, we'll just give five teams here, and I think me and you will probably be in agreement here. Number one being Oregon. I think that they've done enough. They're undefeated. They should easily be the number one team in college football playoff. This is where things get interesting. I do believe the committee will give number two to Georgia. I do think Ohio State has an argument to be number two. With a quality road win in Penn State and a
Mm.
1 point loss on the road uh, in Eugene against the Ducks, the number one team in the country, I think they have an argument to be number two. I would probably personally put them at number two, but I'm sure the committee will put them at two. I put Georgia at two, and then Ohio State at three. Do you agree with the top three so far?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with you with Oregon being number one. That's not even worth discussing, not even worth debating. Next, as far as number two goes, I I think Penn State is no, sorry, not Penn State. I think Ohio State is going to be number two, and I think Ohio State should be number two. Georgia should not be number two because you struggled with Florida. End of discussion. Okay, any team that struggles with my team of all teams does not deserve to be a top team in the country. Sorry, you just don't.
And they barely beat Kentucky too. I know Kentucky's been given tough games this year, but yes, they did struggle against Kentucky as well. So, but with Georgia being the preseason number one, you know how that plays into things.
Yeah.
So I think the three, we got the same teams for the top three. Number four, I'm going to have to give to Miami. Miami is still undefeated. And the difference between this Miami team this year versus last year is last year they blew games. They lost them games they should have won. This year, they are winning these games. They are learning to not blow games, but to actually come back if need be. And they did just that this last weekend against Duke, facing a deficit in the second half. They end up blowing Duke out of the water then. So I'd have to give number four to Miami, and then number five rounding off with the Longhorns.
Yeah, I think me and you are pretty much in agreement, except for our 2 and 3 teams. So number one for me, Oregon. Number two, Ohio State. Number three, Georgia. Number four, Miami, and number five, Texas.
Yeah, if I was picking those would be my top five. So I think we're in agreement with our predict with if they were our picks. I just don't know how the committee is going to see things because we know there is a little bit of SEC bias in there. There always is, and I think that I mean whether you're two or three doesn't matter. And it's the first college football playoff ranking. There's still a lot of the season left. Anything could happen. So, but that's where I have predictions there. And now on to, of course, everyone wants to hear about it top three Heisman candidates right now. Uh, I won't give any particular order, but if I were to pick three right now, this may shock some people, but I'm going to go with um, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Ashton Genty from Boise State. As much as I'd love to say Dylan Gabriel, I do think Cam Ward is playing better football right now. Yes, they're both undefeated, but if I were to look at a football field, yes, Dylan Gabriel can be clean, but some of the passes are check downs where Cam Ward is doing it all. Granted, different offensive line, but when plays need to happen, he's making them. So if I would give him the edge over Dylan Gabriel, Travis Hunter, two-way player, what he's doing out there, both offensively and defensively for the Buffaloes. And let's talk about Colorado there. I mean, they're ranked right now too, so they're doing things right. You got to give them credit; they are winning games. So that would be another. And then Ashton Genty. I mean, the guy just knows how to run. He is the Forrest Gump of college football right now. He is running, he is running, he is running, and he's on pace right now to Barry Sanders' record. I would love to see that be broke. I love seeing records be broke, and he's a phenomenal running back. So if anyone were to break it, I'd love to see him do it. So that'd be my top three right now. David.
So my top three, number one for me is Cam Ward because he leads the FBS in touchdown passes, and there is absolutely no way that Miami is even undefeated without Cam Ward at this point. Other than maybe Louisville, Miami may not have any key signature wins, but time and time and time again, how many times have we seen Cam Ward come through in the clutch? So he's number one for me. Number two for me is Boise State running back Ashton Genty. I do not care that he's a group of five player. Okay, his production is incredible. You can't ignore it. And yeah, it came in a loss against Oregon, but he looked absolutely unstoppable against you
Yeah.
guys. And then number three, speaking of Oregon, number three for me is Dylan Gabriel. I take everything that you said into account, and that's all fair. But what makes Dylan Gabriel stick out the most, Matthew, is that now at this point, he has arguably the best win in the country against Ohio State. And a lot of what goes into Heisman voting is beating these top tier teams. And it wasn't just the fact that he beat Ohio State, Matthew. He looked great against Ohio State. He had 3 total touchdowns. So, yeah, top three for me Cam Ward, Ashton Genty, and Dylan Gabriel. And by the way, I almost said all guys on the West Coast, but I forgot
Yeah.
for a brief second. Cam Ward isn't at Washington State anymore.
Nope, transfer quarterback. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, and there's nothing wrong with those top three picks. Uh, Nowadays, social media and just the online world brings a lot of light to things. And ever since Dion went to Colorado, they're always being covered. And that's Travis Hunter is an amazing talent. So I don't want to take that away from him, but right now he's the odds-on favorite to win. Uh, and normally it wouldn't be that much talked about because we know defensive players usually don't win it. Shoot, if you're not a quarterback, you usually don't win it. So that's why it's tough to even choose him. But there's a reason why he's the odds on. I mean, because of the light that's on them, that's shining on them, because Dion. But Travis Hunter is a great football player, and the fact that he's able to do this at such a high level, uh, I mean, kudos to him. I don't think he'll win it, but he deserves to be in the talk because of what he's doing. Do I think Colorado would still have the same record without him? I think they would. I do think so. And whereas, like you said, Cam Ward, if Miami didn't have Cam Ward, they are not undefeated. So I
yeah.
think that just says volumes as to his production and his play in Miami.
And let's also not forget that Miami's defense has really struggled lately. That was part of the reason why I said that Miami would not be unbeaten if they didn't have Cam Ward, and it's because of how bad defense has looked. And then, as far as Travis Hunter goes, my issue with that is, listen, don't get me wrong, all right. Travis Hunter is a phenomenal player, all right, and I think he should at least win the AP Player of the Year, and then that one award that's for the best overall player. I think it's the Maxwell Award.
Maxwell, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. But here's my issue with him being the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy right now. To me, this just basically feels like, okay, well, no quarterback is really sticking out right now, so let's just go with the next best thing, and that's Travis Hunter. And you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that? Well, I have an issue with Travis Hunter being a favorite over Ashton Genty. And this just feels like, well, we can't really make a group of five guy the odds on favorite because he's still a group of five guy at the end of the day, okay? Um as if that's his fault. Well, I guess it's partially his fault because he chose to go to school there, okay? But for the most part, as if that's really his fault because at the end of the day, I don't care that he's group of five, power five, pink five, Pink Floyd, whatever. Okay, I don't care. His numbers are incredible, and I just think that this is just basically, well, we can't give it to the group of five guy because he's group of five, so we can't really go there. So let's just give it to this guy. Do you agree or disagree, Matthew?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that if Ashton Genty balls out, does what he does, he deserves to win. That's why the Heisman Trophy award it's so controversial because it's always considered a quarterback only category, but it really isn't. And David, eh, to actually this is perfect because these are who you chose for the top three. But here's a quick scenario: Cam Ward, say they win out. He leads them to an undefeated season. Completely turned that Miami program around. Ashton Genty breaks um, Barry Sanders' record, and Boise State makes the college football playoffs as a group of five. And then number three, Dylan Gabriel passes Case Keenum's record, ends up being the number one uh, passing yards and total touchdowns in college football. He's on pace to break Bo Nix's completion percentage too. And if they go undefeated, who does the committee choose? Because that's tough because two out of the three are breaking all-time records, and the third turned a total program around and went undefeated. So I really wouldn't know who to choose in that situation because they all deserve to win it at that point.
Yeah, I wouldn't really know either. And I also want to make it very clear that in most situations and in most seasons, I myself probably would not have a group of five guy as my favorite or as
Yeah.
one of my favorites. Hell, I mean, my favorite right now is a power four guy, and that is Cam Ward. I think you and I both understand that my issue is Travis Hunter being a favorite over Ashton Genty, and this just feels like one of those years where since no quarterback is really sticking out, you need to look outside the box. You need to look other places. But yeah, it is hard to tell at this point, Matthew, who's going to win. I mean, I remember last year, I think Jaden Daniels kind of became the clear cut favorite toward the end of the season, like, maybe midpoint. But the last season, I remember, Matthew, where we didn't really have where
It wasn't a clear cut.
yeah, I mean, it was you remember 2018 when it looked like Tua Tagovailoa was just going to absolutely run away with the Heisman Trophy, and then here comes this short little dude out of Oklahoma named Kyler Murray. He was like, hey, down here,
Yeah.
buddy, okay, I'm coming for you, right? I mean, Tua was the heavy favorite for much of the season, and then toward the end of the season, Kyler Murray just really stuck out to the point where he did win the trophy. So it just kind of feels like that year where we probably really won't know until not just the end of the season, but probably not until the literal trophy presentation.
Yeah, because sometimes a player will get their final stamp on conference championship games. So that could be the time to shine, because if you don't make a conference championship, you don't have that extra game to
Yeah.
really showcase. So it may just, yeah, like you said, come down to the very last moment right before they announce it. So that would be awesome to see those
Yeah.
three.
And of course, we remember LSU didn't make the conference championship last year, but Jaden Daniels was just statistically that much better than everyone else.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually in most cases, if you don't make a conference championship, it definitely does hurt you more than it helps you.
Yeah, yes, it does. So, but that's about all we have today, folks. I'd love to hear your guys' predictions on your top five of the college football playoff, and for those first rankings coming out, and your top three Heisman, and why you think should be the top three, because there is a lot of question marks, a lot of debates on who belongs there. But if you can hit that like, subscribe button, share these videos, let us know how you feeling, and always hit us up in the comment section. We'd appreciate that, guys. But until next time, we are rounding third, and we are headed for home.